Today on the pod, we were talking about Chappell Roan
Political endorsements.
and if artists are required to make them.
And if you can separate the art from the artist.
And we're doing a tribute to Gavin Creel, an artist who affected both of our lives and is gone far too soon. People believe that celebrities belong to them in the public space, and it's so like gross how quickly once someone becomes famous, fans feel like they are responsible for that. They're like, without me, you'd be nothing. You owe me this, and it's like, no.
Someone said all men deserve jail, and I said I completely agree. I think that all men should start in jail and have to earn their way out. People were like, well, you lost me. I'm like, okay,
great.
You just proved to me that you can't earn your way out. I'm starting a tour the day after the election.
Really?
Mm-hmm. November 9th.
Whoa. How long is that tour?
Like 5 weeks, month. Yeah. So it's either going to be like a fucking banger on the first day or going to be really weird.
Yeah.
Really weird.
Do you feel obligated as an artist to give an endorsement today?
I mean, I don't feel pressured to give an endorsement, but I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the election, as much as this show is mostly about like the business of being in the entertainment business and being an artist, election season intertwines that in a really weird way. One, because there's a ton of money made online during elections, from grifters on both sides, from people who are just like advocates on both sides, but also on the market of like news companies reporting on whether it is Taylor Swift's endorsement or Chappell Roan's endorsement. It becomes like that is its own business outside of just the business of politics and fundraising and everything on that side.
Yeah.
So I do think it is relevant to what we talk about, also because I worked in like the political comedy space, but you being in the music space, like there is a lot of pressure on not us because we are not important people.
How dare you?
I hate to break it to you, but on important people in the zeitgeist of American culture or global culture to say something. And it ends up being huge business decisions in addition to personal decisions, whether it is someone like Taylor Swift endorsing or Alex Cooper having Kamala Harris on Call Her Daddy.
So fucking crazy, by the way.
Yeah. Like not something I would have foreseen. And I'm like,
no. And that's, to speak largely on the political climate. It's like a little scary.
And a lot of people also are terrified to say anything about politics because
I know
they are play the middle, like financial. They're worried about their financial future. They're worried about their careers. They're worried about their hireability.
I think for me, I'm less inclined to think of it, obviously, because I'm not in a position to think about it on a business level at this point in my career, because not a lot of people give a shit about what I have to say. And also, personally, like my personal freedom and my personal, like, the way that I feel comfortable is by speaking my mind and sitting on those things when I see something that bothers me and makes me feel crazy. I feel a sense of personal freedom and like a weight being lifted off my chest when I do speak on those things, because it's important to me. And
I think it's important to the world too, but it like, and that can become self-righteous, but you also see the impacts it can have on people when people, like, you can talk about cowardice and people's willingness to talk about politics or inflate it or bring it into their work and the business side of it. But like you look at like the career of like the Dixie Chicks and how their career was like changed just by taking a stance against the U.S. government.
That is such a
you think about
crazy
like
story.
Sinead O'Connor. You think about people whose lives become drastically different and their ability to perform can be ripped away from them based on just standing for what they believe.
And I'm really hopeful that that culture is changing, especially because we're watching things.
I think it is and it isn't. Like within the last 3 months, had a business manager say to my face that he was much more comfortable signing conservative comedians because if they get canceled or do something cancelable, their audience will probably stick around.
I think it's really hard because I mean, the thing is, I say that I think it's really hard, and also it's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, to me, pretty cut and dry, pretty clear. You speak on what you want to speak on. If you feel called to speak on something, you should speak on it. And I get the fear. I do. I get it. And again, I'm not in a position like someone with a bigger platform where I'm too fearful at this point in my career to speak on something, and that may change. But my 2 rules about being an artist and with any kind of notoriety are: don't release anything you don't like, and don't do anything that makes you feel icky. And not speaking up about certain things makes me feel icky. Whether it's personal preservation, business preservation, or whatever, it makes me feel bad. It makes me feel rotted in my soul. So I choose to do that. That may be different for other people, and I respect that. But like for me, I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you just see it on mass scale around the elections because people go insane during election season. Like, obviously these issues are always prevalent in the United States. I think a lot of people who are passionate or aren't passionate about issues affecting the country, like, have a vehicle for that passion or disillusionment.
Totally.
Every 4 years, every 2 years, really, but like people really only seem to give a shit on a national election scale.
Yeah.
And it's an easy vehicle for the media. It's an easy vehicle for people who are fringely associated with politics or like might have strong beliefs, but aren't really doing anything in their own communities or on an advocate level where they're like, I voted, I did something, and I can in turn shame the people who are not taking that singular action that I'm doing. Because I also know a lot of people who are probably going to vote down ballot, may not feel comfortable voting top of the ticket for a Democrat or Republican, who are like very active in their communities trying to make a difference, or who are begrudgingly voting on one side or the other.
It is difficult for me to condemn those people. Like, it is extremely difficult, and I don't do it. And I if I've said anything in the past that has made it seem like that, I don't condemn those people. It is a difficult decision to make for me personally, and I know what I will do, but I'm like, it's also like, I'm so marginally affected in the way that these policy is like in policy that will comparatively to other people, the way that a lot of people are directly affected and will directly be affected heavily as well
by one administration or another.
Right. So it's difficult for me to condemn any of those people. And I won't. Sorry.
Anyway, this becomes especially relevant in what we talk about on the podcast with like controversies that surround artists like Taylor Swift or Chappell Roan recently, being gigantic artists who either feel pressured to or on their own personal conviction, like make an endorsement or drive people to register to vote. And it, I think, drives an interesting question that dominates pop culture of what obligation do artists and people who are creating in the public eye have to, one, speak to political issues at all.
Sure.
Two, make endorsements for candidates. Three, if that artist then is making political statements that you disagree with, like how does that affect your view of the art? Because I think like
separate the artist from the artist type shit.
Yeah, because while Taylor Swift has made her political stance, I wouldn't think of Taylor Swift's music as inherently political at all. In a way that like I do think Chappell Roan's music is more political in nature, or on the opposite, totally different example. You think of J.K. Rowling. I don't think of her books as particularly political, and I don't think of Harry Potter as very. Like Harry Potter is like.
I mean, I feel like the end of the entire conflict is like this, like fascist. I mean, it's like based on like Nazi
kind of,
Germany,
but it's not like a complex villain. Like Voldemort is like big bad, whatever. But sorry, I don't mean to spoil Harry Potter. But
Voldemort's the bad guy.
But much of her post Harry Potter career has been spent hammering a single point political issue that she feels passionate
mentally
about.
Ill.
No, I like it. Honestly makes me sad because I like was such a Harry Potter fan as a kid, and it like it is one of those things I can't separate from the artist. I do not feel the same way
about
Harry Potter
I know
that I did. And I watched those movies every Christmas. Like
I know.
growing up, like they were a huge part of my life in a way that
I don't know if it is genuinely possible to separate the artist from the art. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, I don't. But again, I think it is. It depends context for me because like I can appreciate
there's nothing really that black and white in the world, I guess.
Yeah, and like I think if for example J.K. Rowling, if she wasn't such an asshole to really trans people specifically, asshole. Like if she was just like run of the mill, like really rich Republican, I don't know that it would like affect my thoughts on the books or like her previous work in the same way. I might be like, oh, that sucks that she's just like a rich, disconnected person. But there are a lot of people who get rich and become disconnected. Like, I think because she is such an outspoken fucking asshole, it makes it almost impossible for me to engage in anything she's doing without thinking of the fact like, oh, she is a legitimately like harmful person to trans people, like, and is targeting people specifically.
Yeah.
So that becomes more difficult to separate in a way that, like, I don't know most of the like random artists I'm following's like political affiliation. I could probably make assumptions.
Right.
And I don't know that it would really dramatically affect my ability to like enjoy a singular song or thing. But once someone becomes like, this is a part of my identity and I need you to know about it, like I couldn't tell you a single thing J.K. Rowling has done since writing Harry Potter other than bully trans people.
Literally.
And so it becomes a difficult thing to separate.
What a fucking psycho.
Yeah, it's so sad.
It's really fucked up. Crazy.
But
let me ask you this though. It's easy like to make comparisons to like, not to me and Chappell Roan, that's not what I mean, but you know what I mean, like that's not, let me be clear, that's not what I mean, but like my position as an artist, I suppose, or as a musician, and then say like, would you feel comfortable publicly endorsing a candidate? I'm asking.
It's not even like the actual act of endorsing doesn't make me uncomfortable. The act of thinking my opinion is important enough that my endorsement is necessary,
sure,
is what makes me uncomfortable in that situation. Does that make
no,
sense?
I think so too. It's like, I mean, I get that.
Like, I'm fine telling someone my opinion about the election and why I would vote one way or another, like, and the fact that I feel very disillusioned with American politics,
sure,
and wouldn't scoff at someone for voting, but also won't scoff at people who are not voting or just trying to get by or participate in their life. Like, I still choose to vote because it is a marginal impact that I feel like I can, and I would rather participate in our society than not. As cynical as I get, I don't want to let go of one of my few connections to participating in society, even if like a vote for a single person is a vote for like the administration they're bringing in, and a lot of things about the American administration as a whole, no matter who is in power, makes me incredibly uncomfortable. And so like, that's tough for me. But on issues that do matter to people I love or matter to me, there are things that I side with the Democratic Party on. And so that is, I don't know, like the endorsement thing is tough for me because it's same with even these huge mega famous people. I think if you are so fickle about your own opinion that it takes someone you enjoy, like, see, you have a parasocial relationships.
I mean, yeah.
Like, if you have so little of an opinion yourself that it takes someone you have a parasocial relationship.
We could go down that rabbit hole a million times.
Saying they're voting for someone for you to make that decision.
Right, but there are people like that, and there are a lot of them, which is a problem. Absolutely. Yeah, but it's just the truth. I mean,
and you're not wrong. And, like, there's different scales of it, too, where.
Totally.
Like, I think the endorsement of, say, like, Ta-Nehisi Coates doing a book tour right now about.
I have just been watching a lot of
because I just bought the book. I have not read it yet.
What's it called?
The Message.
The Message, yes. I watched him.
But all these media tours.
Yeah.
And it's about 3 different parts of. One is in Senegal, I believe. The last part is set in Palestine, and the middle part might be set in the United States. Haven't read it yet. Obviously, I've seen the media tour, but he is someone who has devoted his life and his public image to political advocacy for people who are disenfranchised and marginalized in a way where I could see his endorsement having an impact and actually changing people's minds. Or even the way he is talking about Palestine on national television is a perspective people aren't getting, and that's important.
Yeah,
and
I watched him talk about how that's like not a perspective that's
and he is
American
researched,
media.
and that is like, as opposed to like, if Taylor Swift came out and said something, that would actually have a margin, like a, I can't even say marginal, a huge impact because of the audience she has.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing. But I'm also like, but is that where I'm going to get my thoughts on?
No,
like
you're
the
not. You're not.
I'm not. That's the tough thing for me about endorsements, because there are people who the most important to that person to them in life is Taylor Swift. Absolutely. Or Chappell Roan or these other people. And so they need to know where and like, and I also understand saying, so like, if I'm giving,
it's impossible to put yourself in that position, because you would have to be able to understand that kind of that kind of impact.
And I also understand the level of like, people are paying thousands of dollars for Taylor Swift tickets, and it's like, if I'm putting this much of my money towards this artist or this person, I want to know they align with something that I believe, or like,
or if they don't
believe in the direction of society I believe in. I understand that, and I can empathize with that. But I go back and forth as to like, I personally do not need to see a celebrity endorse one side or the other. If I became incredibly famous, I would have a hard time grappling with like, is my voice really necessary? But that might just be me not thinking my voice is that necessary. And
which I think, like, to me, what is really what it comes down to is a moral question, whether or not you feel morally obligated to do so or to not do so. Yeah, I saw that, Tana Mojo.
Yes.
She posted a clip basically saying that she was offered a shitload of money to endorse the GOP.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't take it. And I don't think she did. I don't really listen to them, but I saw this clip on TikTok. And people were accusing then other influencers of having taken that money. The largest of them being Bryce Hall, because he has gone off the fucking deep end.
Word.
And been just like full blown Trumpy MAGA.
He's kind of in that like Aiden Ross sphere, whatever, though, where I wouldn't be surprised if that's just what he believes. I wasn't
shocked by that endorsement whatsoever, but it's like become an identity now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, he's saying that he didn't take that money or whatever. He wasn't offered that money, and I don't fucking care, honestly. But I'm like,
well, and circling back around to
I think it's morally reprehensible either way.
But circling back around to the business side of creation that we build this podcast around, there is a lot more money available to you if you're willing to endorse right-wing ideas on the internet. That is just a fact. Like, and knowing, because I have negotiated with some of these liberal organizations that are fundraising and trying to get their money out, and do not, like, it was so funny whenever Walter and I were making content where people would be like, this is clearly funded by George Soros. I was like, fucking let George Soros cut me a check. There's money available somewhere. Like, we were broke trying to just make like a couple $100 on our TikToks. Yeah. And people were like, oh, this is clearly funded by whatever, these like left-wing billionaires. It's like, no. But there is proof of like whole organizations like Turning Point USA is funded by right-wing billionaires. There's all of this information about not Tim Cook. What is the streamer? The bald streamer, right-wing streamer, something Cook.
I have no fucking idea.
Or Tim Pool.
I don't even know who that
is. He just basically got outed for like being paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars by the Russian government to,
oh my God.
Yes, to basically just be pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine, pro-right-wing government, or the right-wing American government.
Yeah.
And there just is more money in the right-wing grift, because these right-wing billionaires who are trying to cut their tax rates, pay as little as possible, will put tens of millions of dollars into that message, where it's, again, the reason that doesn't happen on the left is because it is not in the political or financial incentives of billionaires to fund left-wing media, because it is against their financial interest.
Sure.
And so you see that investment being made into right-wing media spaces that it's not in left-wing spaces.
I just think it's like, I do think, I personally find it, I don't know, I think on either side, taking money to endorse a political party is, like I said, I think it's morally reprehensible. But I think, especially as like an artist, I'm just like, I just don't know if I could ever get to a place where that felt okay to me.
Yeah.
I really hope to God that I am never in a position where someone offers me that. That feels insane, and I would feel crazy for the rest of my life. But like, I don't know, like seeing young people in a position like that is just like, I don't know, it's just all very, very crazy to me. And I think we've taken a step in our political climate that is, I don't know, the whole thing is just really, really crazy to me. And I hope I hope to never be in a position where I feel directly affected by that, by the like media, celebrity, pop culture side of things.
Yeah.
I really hope that that doesn't become a problem for me personally. That would be really, really difficult.
Do you feel like it is an artist's responsibility or obligation to endorse a candidate?
I don't know the answer to that question. I have oscillated between thinking yes, I do. I don't know if it's necessarily the thing that calls me to say yes. I don't know if that is specifically hinges on endorsing a political candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it does. I think it has to do with more, just like I said, like just more like moral obligation as a human being and as a member of society, to speak on the things that you believe are wrong. I don't know if that translates to endorsing a political candidate. My gut is saying no. I do not think it is someone's responsibility to endorse a political candidate. I do think it is an artist or a public figure's responsibility to call out things that they see going on in the world that they believe are wrong because of the platform that they have amassed. Whether that aligns with a political candidate or not, or whether it's like tied together in some way, I don't know. And like I said, it's really, like we said earlier, like it is difficult to actually ask that question not being in that position.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's kind of where I stand on it. I'm like with the Chappell stuff. Like I feel like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like this article came out, I don't know where it was, like Vogue or Vanity. It was like a big article, right? Where she's like, I'm not going to endorse a candidate, and this is why.
Well, I don't even think it was Vogue or anything. I think it was like Pop Crave or one of those.
No, I think
like,
they reposted. Pop Crave has been posting her quotes. Like,
but I think those like pop whatever outlets are the people that started up first, and then it became a like. Absolutely. I think it was just like.
But there's a full interview in a magazine.
Oh yeah,
where she talks about this, which those quotes were pulled from.
Yeah,
and I completely agree with what she's saying. I completely agree, and it's an extraordinarily common leftist take to have critical thought about both candidates, whether or not you're going to vote for, like, of course I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. Of course. I would have a hard time, I think, endorsing a candidate because I would be like, why does this fall on me? And this feels like counter to what my beliefs are. However, like, I do think I don't know if I actually think this. I've been oscillating between two ideas of like, is it your responsibility with a platform if you know that you can make real change to endorse a candidate? Like someone like Taylor Swift, like we know it was like 38,000 kids registered to vote when she tweeted to register to vote.
Well, and it was even crazier than that on her endorsement. I don't remember the exact number, but it was in the hundreds of thousands click through on her link for voter registration.
Well, it's like she knows that will happen.
It's real influence, but that's also the biggest pop star we're talking about the world.
In the world. The most popular girl in the world, literally. So it's like, it's difficult because it's like with that, I don't know. I don't know if it's their responsibility. I know that personally, I would have a very difficult time not endorsing a candidate if I knew that I was going to have, you know what I mean? Well, even if my beliefs stood on critical thought.
It's tough to, it really depends on like how much have you made your platform out of advocacy.
Sure.
Because like Taylor Swift's endorsement means a certain amount.
I don't know.
I don't think the endorsement means anything because I think she had made her opinion on Donald Trump clear 4 years ago. It was 8 years ago, however long ago, her first endorsement.
In that documentary, she like has a whole breakdown about wanting to say something.
Exactly.
Which is like, I don't know, hilarious to me. But
And it's like, do you really need her to say the same thing again when Donald Trump is running again?
Sure.
Not necessarily. I will say,
you know where she stands.
There's a difference between like making a public stance though and knowing specifically with her when you have the power to like, I post a link and 400,000 people will click it.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Is like, it's a weird thing too, because that's something campaigns and like a lot of businesses pay per click.
Sure.
Like when I was still working in political comedy, I would get hit up by like oil companies and shit where they're like, here's a survey or a thing. If you can get signatures on this, we'll give you $1.50 a signature.
Sure.
So it's like, if you can convert 400,000 signatures, that is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to campaigns,
but also,
to these political organizations. So that's one thing where it's like, it can have real tangible effects, but it's tough to know on an endorsement level. Like, are you really having tangible effect?
I don't know. And I don't even think that's necessarily the point, but I think that if you know in your heart as a human being, much less an artist or an influencer or whatever the fuck you are, that you have influence over young people, young voters, and you know that specifically with Chappell, her platform is based around,
has been built on advocacy,
for
queer people,
but also her platform is built on the work of those people as well.
Yes.
And I do think she knows that. So not in
one, I don't think what is tough about, one, becoming so famous so quickly, and two, having this come in an interview that was like not about politics. It's just like the interviewer kind of doing their job, but also searching for that thing that's gonna make
blow
the
this interview up,
get syndicated across all these different networks. It's clear she's thinking about it. Like she turned down the Pride performance at the White House because, and that was while it was still Biden running, but on the level of wanted to said she might read like Palestinian poetry, and then her publicist was like,
you can't do that.
If you fuck with the US government, they might fuck you and your family up. And so for her own sake, whatever, decides to pull out.
Yeah.
Which again are crazy decisions for someone in their 20s who's been famous.
It's a crazy decision,
like worldwide famous for a year or two to have to make.
Yeah.
But it's tough to know too, what is your impact in making a statement or in...
I think you just have to go with your gut. Like, I really do. I really think you just have to go with what feels exactly right to you. That said, I do think you can also say, fuck you if you decide to vote for Trump. You know what I mean? Like, I do, but and playing the fence on that is really hard.
No, and I think
and it makes me feel weird.
But there's different scales of it too, because there is back in the 90s, famously Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy sneakers too. Not going to take a side specifically because on a business level, him playing the middle was the most profitable way for him to become a billionaire. And for Taylor Swift or Chappell Roan, there's no question. Like, in my brain, I think anyone who, like she was saying in her statement, like, use your critical thinking skills. Yeah. No one using critical thinking is like, she's voting for Trump.
No,
Chappell Roan's
a
Trump supporter.
It's not about.
She could be doing drag at the White House next year with Trump in office.
Yeah, totally. But it's not necessarily about that for me, because it's like, it's very obvious to me. And if you really can't tell, then I'm like, okay, then you've lost the plot. But like, to me, it's less about where she stands personally and what kind of impact she could potentially have on saying things just fucking straight up exactly how she believes them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's difficult. And I don't know. I don't fault her for anything that she's said. I completely understand. And to cancel a show because it's just rocked her makes me just my heart break for her.
Well, like, she just has to. But I also think it's interesting on.
And the right move, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you don't want to do a fucking show because you're fucked up and you can't fucking get out of bed in the morning, don't fucking do the show. And if you have a fucking problem with that, I'm going to speak directly to camera here. If you have a fucking problem with that, fuck you.
A comedian on Twitter about Chappell Roan is going to lose fans if she keeps canceling shows. Not me, babe. She can cancel her whole tour if she wants to. We'll still be bumping super graphic, ultra modern girl in this house. If you possess the mind that wrote Femininomenon, you can do whatever the fuck you want.
Exactly.
Like,
I'm also just like, people, these artists are fucking people, and they don't owe you anything.
But I also think that's been like half of the Chappell discourse this year. They've gotten like this huge famous world around her just because people believe that celebrities belong to them in the public space. And it's so like gross how quickly once someone becomes famous, fans feel like they are responsible for that. They're like, without me, you'd be nothing. And so you owe me this. And it's like, no, they are the reason for their success. I'm sure they had help. I'm sure, like, whatever. Like, writing Phenomenon and these songs
Fucking
are the
Pink
reason.
Pony Club.
Like,
yeah, that's
like,
why she's fucking famous.
Yeah, and like whether or not you supported her, other people would have and will.
Totally.
And it's a really weird thing about just like stan culture and also just parasocial relationships. I think it's partially social media, but it's also like a gender thing because
completely. I mean, it plagues women specifically.
I cannot think of literally a single male musician
who has the same experience.
Who there's been discourse about who they're voting for.
It's so fucking true.
Like, I actually can't name one.
And the irony of that is that it's like people are like, well, your rights will be affected, so you should vote. I'm like, what about everybody else?
Yeah, it's like,
what about the people whose rights won't be affected?
I'm going to vote as well. Like, it's just like,
why are you not speaking up? Because this is clearly a personal issue for me in one way or another.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it doesn't land on our backs to fucking endorse these people. You know what I mean? I don't know. I really I saw some takes that I was just shocked by, especially about the cancellation when she didn't go to All Things Go.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, God fucking forbid I am ever in this fucking situation, because I would rake you people over the coals. It is just so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. And I also saw some wonderful takes. People were like, girl, take your fucking time.
Well, yeah,
we love you.
It's a tough thing with festivals too, because I'm sure a lot of people bought tickets specifically to see Chappell.
There were amazing musicians on that fucking ticket.
No, of course. But I'm sure, but I'm just saying, I'm sure people bought tickets specifically to see singular artists, and I don't know how festivals deal with like, oh, one of our headliners just dropped out the day before.
They replaced it with local drag.
Yeah, incredible.
Iconic.
But again,
iconic decision.
On a level of like, if I can understand as an uninformed fan feeling some kind of way if I spent $300 on a ticket specifically to see Chappell.
I'm like, that's on you.
And
if you bought a ticket to that lineup for one person,
sure, but people do that. Like, people do that though, and I think that like, at least if you're doing that in concert and Chappell cancels her own concert, you're gonna get your money back.
Sure.
And so the festival thing complicates just the recourse of it.
I guess, but at the same time, I'm like, go see the other artists. I'm like, like I said, it's an amazing bill. I'm like, if you bought your ticket, if you bought a $400, $500 ticket to see one artist on a nine band bill.
No, and I say this like all to say like I am pro her being able to drop out, and like I'm supporting her in that. But I do understand where, especially like I want to find the polite way to say this, like media literate people or like empathetic people will
of course
be pissed. And it is a hard, like, tickets for any live music, like that situation is already just so fucked up because of like, for example, like Kara and I saw Remy Wolf like a week ago.
How was it?
Sick show.
Jamie
it was
also went.
Fucking awesome. This is a Remy Wolf hat.
She's so good. Oh yeah, she's so fucking good. I love her.
I like to play the game in New York where I played the last minute game. We didn't have tickets, but we knew we were going to go to the show. And so I waited until like maybe 30 minutes before the show to buy my tickets. And I got $17 tickets in like the lower bowl. But the tickets themselves were $17. The fees on top of that were like $14 per ticket. It was like 40% per ticket.
Yeah.
That Ticketmaster, just as being the intermediary, took, or StubHub, or whoever it was.
Those companies are the devil.
And like that was me getting a dirt cheap ticket. A lot of people paid hundreds of dollars for those tickets.
People are fucking advocating in Congress against Ticketmaster as a monopoly.
Yeah.
Like it's not like
so I get like that throws a wrinkle into the complication of just like when shows are people are putting a lot of money into seeing these artists. And I build their weeks around it, build like their paychecks, or like have a jar they're saving up for the event to see Chappell once in a year.
Yeah.
Because of the impact she has as an artist, which speaks to like how incredible her run this past year and a half has been, and like what she's built up over the past decade in music. But I get where it becomes more complicated than that. But like, to bring it all back around, I feel like so much of the discourse around her specifically is people feeling like she suddenly belongs to them, or like she is beholden to how any fan feels or wants, or like, I don't know. It's crazy how quickly in becoming famous you like lose any right to privacy, any right
to like any other feeling than great. Like, what is that fucking Olivia Rodrigo lyric where she says like, I'm grateful and I'm kind. I'm happy all the time. What is it? All the time. I'm grateful all the time. I'm sexy and I'm kind. I'm pretty when I cry. And it's an amazing lyric. It's so fucking simple, but it hits on something that's so much deeper. And I think this is exclusive. Well, maybe not completely exclusive, but more prevalent in female artists, where it's like when you hit it the way that you want to hit it, you then only have the option to be grateful and kind and quiet and sweet.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I definitely think you see this with famous men as well, but it's just scaled down.
Yeah.
Because I think you see this a lot with...
It's celebrity culture in general.
Yeah. Once you have become a certain level of famous, or especially once you've earned a certain amount of money, I think people just say, like, you should shut up and be grateful. Because this happens a lot with athletes once they have... Hit it, because there are athletes who make $50 million a year, $100 million, like...
And you're like, how can you possibly have any issue with anything that's going on? You're making so much money.
And it's like, okay, that's true, but there's also, like... a random man behind the scenes who just owns the team, who's printing the same amount of money for themselves for not doing the Herculean things the athlete is doing, or whatever. Like, but, or even just having a complaint about your coach, having a complaint about whatever, you get labeled as a diva or a problem or any of these things. And this happens with male musicians, famous people as well, but it is just like scaled up, I feel like, to the 50th, massively. 100th degree for women.
Yeah. And it's like, we always talk about like, this, like, you know, early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s, like TMZ culture and all these people who were women who are like completely fucked over by it, i.e. like Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton, and all these people. And we look back and go, oh my God, we were so awful as a culture to them. And I'm like, you motherfuckers are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You're doing the exact same thing.
We have not learned the lessons of our past at all.
No. And it's just so disappointing. I mean, it's just.
Well, I even think my hot take about the Chappell situation on it being so gendered of it all, like, I think all of this has stemmed out of the Taylor Swift endorsement, like that being discourse, and partially because Taylor's a woman and partially because she's the biggest pop star in the world. But because all of this, there's two sides of it that stems back. There's the Chappell interview and the stuff at the White House and everything else. But at the beginning of this football season, Taylor Swift making tons of headlines, dating NFL star Travis Kelce, and because another football player on that team, Patrick Mahomes' wife, Brittany Mahomes, likes a photo that Donald Trump, people are like, and then she kind of doubled down. I think they were like, are you a Trump supporter? And she basically was like, yes. And optically, being the like number one receiving option on the Chiefs and the quarterback, like who is the best player in the NFL now, Patrick Mahomes. Already, everything around the Chiefs, they say Taylor Swift is distraction, it's pulling away from football, everything else. Like, you don't want it to become then a public issue of like, is our most important player and like a top 5 most important player and our like most famous player, are their girlfriend and wife like beefing like while we're going into this NFL season? That becomes its own narrative that you separate from people think because they're like filmed in a press box together because they're both watching their partners play football, that suddenly Taylor Swift didn't mean her previous endorsement. It's not convenient to her anymore. Cause she's in like a box and being polite around another like Republican. And so then the world blows up and says like, Taylor, you need to come out and say something against Brittany Mahomes, which again is like, you're asking multi-billion-dollar entity in Taylor Swift and multi-billion-dollar entity in the NFL to come into conflict. All of that forces Taylor Swift basically then to navigate keeping a good face with Brittany Mahomes, which is like the football locker room dynamic of trying to keep that polite and cordial and not making her even more hated by the NFL sector of the world. Yeah. While also what I think are her real political beliefs. Like, I don't think it's like a front. Like, I don't think people decide to take these on, but like she comes out, she has her endorsement of Kamala Harris after the debate. That whether or not the endorsement really has an impact on changing her fans' minds, I do think the like voter registration, getting people over to the link is a real tangible impact. Totally. But then I think that trickles down to every media organization sees how much buzz is created around this, how many eyes go to Taylor Swift and her vote. Like Fox News does 2 weeks of wall-to-wall coverage about Taylor Swift. Trump is saying, I hate her, whatever. And suddenly they go, who are the other women on the top of the world right now? Turn to Chappell Roan. Who are you? Whatever, like finding.
Yeah.
And I do think there's some dynamic of, because of Chappell's willingness to respond to people. She's just like, takes
She's really young too.
Yeah, really young. But like, it's interesting of like, she responds to political criticisms, to criticism in general. Like I have never seen people like having discourse or asking about like Sabrina Carpenter, who's also on the top of the world's like political affiliation or world.
Right.
So I think it's partially because like she's building around some kind of advocacy, but I don't know. Like it feels like it was like a gotcha from the journalist trying to pull it out of her, and then Chappell responded once, got backlash, responded to that backlash, and it just like eats its own tail.
It's just like a door that now she can't close.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate, I think, for her. And I hope to God that she's just taking the time that she needs to take and figuring out how to navigate this, because I can't imagine it's easy. And I really genuinely do not know what I would do in that situation. So it's difficult for me to criticize whatever the fuck she's doing. I will say I agree with her take on it from a political standpoint, because I do think both candidates are bad. However, like, we exist in the system right now, and you or I or all three of us or 10 of us or 100 of us are not changing it in the next week, probably in the next year, probably in the next 10 years. So we have to figure out a way to function within the system that we have right now. And
well, I understand, even on a context of being like, I appreciate, like, I feel bad that I feel like she got bullied into basically being like, this is who I'm voting for. Like, obviously I'm not voting for Trump.
Yeah.
Like, that she had to say that. And like, there are real stakes in these elections.
Of course.
And I think there are a lot of young people who feel very similar to her.
Yeah.
On both the I'm going to vote and I'm not going to vote side of, you see the mass atrocities that the U.S. government carries out on either party, in funding wars, and like basically like our whole generation grew up in the wake of 9/11, where the government killed 1 million people.
Yeah.
On a basis of, in countries that like did not have anything to do with 9/11, like on the basis of this lie. And we still like are constantly bombarded with like death on our phone every day that is being done, if not at the hands of the U.S. government, like with the endorsement of the U.S. government, or with
government
weapons or
yes.
money. And so not wanting to stand behind and be like, yes, I'm endorsing this person. I totally understand. Even if you...
Of course, because they're committing fucking atrocities every single day.
Even if on like a lot of different issues you may align with them more than the other candidate. Sure. And like you can say, like, the reason she is saying like, yes, I'm voting for Kamala Harris is like, there are, whether it is on the LGBT side of the world or just like tons of financial and social issues, I get why they align, but it's wild to then say like, it is this celebrity, because they're on top of the world's obligation to explain where they stand on that, and then to make an opinion and plant the flag.
I suppose you're right. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I get like influence is real,
it's
and
tough.
we like I cannot understate like whether or not Taylor's words about Kamala Harris changed anyone's mind, because I'm not convinced they do, or like really do. I do think I have the power to leverage 100,000 people or multiple hundreds of thousands of people registering to vote. Like, that is tangible impact.
That's real impact.
In the same way that like
that matters.
Advocacy is one thing, raising money is another. Like, there are different ways that you can have a tangible impact on people's lives.
Totally.
And I struggle to know, because I do think a lot of people who like Chappell are of similar opinions about the U.S. government's role in wars, and like in Israel and Palestine, in around the world, but don't know if they feel comfortable voting for
and this is where I get
administration
stuck,
like that,
right? Like, because I feel similarly, right? Where it's like I do not feel fully comfortable with the Democratic option, obviously, for many reasons. However, I feel less comfortable with any kind of impact that I do have telling people to not vote, or I don't feel comfortable not voting, because I don't feel like that's the better option. Like I don't know if I'm right, but I personally don't feel comfortable.
Well, no, I understand where people get cynical because, like,
of course I
again,
get it.
we see thousands and thousands of people dying at the hands of whether it's U.S. missiles or any of these things the government carries out, even on like a police state level. There's lots of things within the government that no matter what slate of candidates is available to us in like the two-party system or even the third-party candidates who break through and can get 1%, like none of those people are changing the state, like the police state of the United States, the military presence we have in the world, and the desire of our country to like maintain some kind of like military hegemony around the world. And so I get not wanting to, like, not feeling
confident or comfortable
or just like you can make any difference in that. And so it's like, why would I
do it?
Why would I do it?
I get that. But something in my gut, like I remember we had this conversation I think Sad Summer or something about it in the band, and something in my gut just doesn't feel right encouraging or endorsing that kind of cynicism, especially on a bigger scale.
Well, and I think especially when in the election there are tangible, like whether or not
that will affect
people. Because you can
absolutely.
say
Tangibly.
no matter who gets elected, like America is still going to be sending bombs to Israel or to Ukraine or whatever, like political issues make you upset. But whoever gets elected will affect like who the next 2 to 3 Supreme Court justices are, who is making decisions about healthcare in this country.
So I just can't in good conscience not encourage people to vote. Like,
no,
I
agree with you, but I do understand why people sit out.
Completely.
And I understand why people wouldn't want to tie their name to either candidate.
And I don't also like have an answer for those people. I don't have, and thank God I'm not a fucking politician, but I'm like, and also I'm extremely grateful that I'm not in a position where people are begging me to say something about it.
Yeah.
But here I am saying something about it.
Well, that's kind of where I wanted to get into this conversation in the first place. It's just like, what obligation do people in the public eye have to speak to?
I really don't know. It's a really hard question and conversation to have, because while you want, like I said, I think you have to be aware, or you have to at least do your best to understand what kind of tangible impact you can have, and then judge it from that. You know what I mean? Or also, like I said, I think you just need to listen to your fucking gut. I think if you like, I remember there was some festival, I think, where I couldn't not say something about what was going on in Palestine. Like I just felt it in my stomach, and it scared me, obviously, but I'm like, it just felt wrong to me at that moment to not say something. It was just on my mind, so it was weighing on my heart and my mind so heavily that I just had to do it. And I think if you listen to yourself, because I think Chappell literally said this, you know what's right and wrong in your heart, and if you see wrong being done and you feel called to speak on it, then you should. Having the public pressure is another factor that I don't necessarily feel. And I don't know how I would feel in that situation. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to that. I don't feel like people should publicly pressure people into speaking on something that they don't necessarily feel like they have, all the information or whatever. But I don't know. There's also a part of me that feels like you do have a responsibility with a platform like that.
Well, and especially, does it become on the opposite end? Like if Chappell does accept the White House invitation for Pride, sure. Because you see artists turn down the White House, you see sports teams turn down the White House for different events. Like that happened during the Trump administration, happens during Democratic administrations as well. You just see it happen. Is on Pride, Chappell going and performing at the White House an endorsement of the White House, like by showing up, like, because I think there are some people who would take that as, I am performing at the White House. I don't care who is in office, or like, it's not about the government. It's about either like a greater sense of nationalism or I think a lot of people do not think this critically about politics either. And so it's like,
either. I think that's
if you've
really
grown
difficult.
up and it's like the president is asking me to sing for the president, a lot of people are just going to say yes and not think of it like beyond like, oh, I really like this person or that. Like, I don't think people, I think that Twitter and TikTok and these different things shift our perception of how actively online people are. And I think like part of Chappell's downfall and parts of this is her willingness to engage with people who are so really online.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think that's a bad thing for her to engage with people who are upset, but it gets to a point where it's like, okay, you've said your piece.
It's a door that you open and you can't close.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. And like I said, I have a difficult time criticizing her in any way because I just mostly hope that she's okay.
Yeah.
And that she keeps making music because I love it. And so I'm like, don't bully her into not doing this anymore because I don't know.
But it's not only just making music, because her music is doing positive things for like
the culture
and the community, but also like her concerts are a safe space for queer people to go in.
Fucking the
like
boot heel
here
of
we are like performing in random non-LGBTQ friendly state.
It's important,
and here's a place where they can have a free like happy evening and enjoy their time.
It's really important. And I also think like, you know, I think some people have this idea about celebrities or musicians or whatever, and they're like, musicians stay out of politics. And what I would say to that is that art in general is inherently political and should be. And so when you tell these people to stay out of it, especially like, I don't know, it obviously depends on the genre, but like, I mean, it doesn't though, really, because I'm like, art, what is that fucking quote? It's like, art is meant to disturb the comforted and comfort the disturbed. And I believe that to be true. And I think for me, moving culture forward in any way, which is what you always hope to do when you make art, right? Is to have a lasting impact on culture in some way. The culture is maybe not necessarily dictated by politics, but it is an extremely important part of it. And where we are in culture,
all art is political, but political art is rampant throughout like I would say like not all art is political, but I do think Chappell's art, because of the nature of American politics.
I don't really know if I agree. Like
I don't think like, because there are a lot of people who make art either to make themselves happy or like it can be influenced by politics in the way that I think of like after World War II, almost all of the musicals for like 5 years on Broadway were like really happy bonbon musicals because people were fucking depressed coming out of war.
But that's what I'm saying. Like I think
it's a response to social conditions.
Yes,
and so
which is
in turn,
usually a response to the political climate.
Yeah, but that is the underlying assumption that politics underlie everything, which they do. Like, but
like I even think like I talked about this in an interview a long time ago, but like I think that the resurgence of like pop punk in the last couple years is in direct response to the Trump administration because you see it pop up for the first time, not for the first time, but in the first time in mainstream culture with like white suburban kids post 9/11 with American Idiot. Is like when we really start to get into like punk or like any kind of alt music in the mainstream, in like I said, in mainstream white suburban culture with American Idiot.
Yeah.
And obviously that album is
incredible.
Amazing, but exclusively political.
Yeah.
So then you have, you know, a couple really, really good solid years with pop punk and alt rock music kind of in the forefront of the mainstream on regular fucking pop radio. And then it kind of fades. We go into the recession. We have like recession era pop, which is like Lady Gaga and like Usher and like all of these things kind of being at the forefront. You see this massive resurgence of angry white kids in the suburbs post 2020, which is like not not a coincidence.
I do think the Trump administration had a huge impact. I also think that we are seeing in America the first generation of people who are going to live not as long as their parents. The first generation of people who are going to make less money than their parents.
Sure.
The American people generally are getting shafted by their government and by like culture at large. Like there are very few people who are, and like Donald Trump, I think, is an embodiment of this in a lot of ways. Yeah. But there are very few people who are reaping the rewards of society and are reaping it in such major ways while everyone else is struggling to get by. Sure. And so I think that pop punk in turn
for that,
is a
take about American Idiot. But it's okay.
But how though? American
I
Idiot
don't know.
was a response to 9/11.
No, that's not what
And,
I'm saying.
like,
I'm not saying that like alt rock music was not in the mainstream pre American Idiot. I'm talking about what we understand as like
sure,
a
but
pop
Green
punk
Day became like one of the biggest bands in the
in
world on the basis of that album out of 9/11.
And I do genuinely think that it was the first album that made that kind of music accessible to teenagers in affluent white suburbia. Which
it is definitely, and I wasn't a teenager yet at that time, but it was definitely the first album for me that felt like I experienced in in any kind of way.
Same.
And I was probably 7 at the time.
I was like 8 or 9, yeah. That doesn't make sense. I was the same age as
that
you.
was in conflict to the government.
Sure.
Like in conflict to
in like an extremely mainstream way.
Yes.
And like I think that was like a direct fucking call out that wasn't like sort of shrouded in prose or whatever. It was just like a straight up fucking this is what's going on and this is how we feel about it. And that appealed to the mainstream in a way that was palatable and digestible. And that's what you see then the culture moving towards that in the next 10-ish years, right?
Yeah.
And then it kind of goes away for a little bit and then it kind of comes back in this massive, and like I said, maybe not directly in response to the Trump administration itself, but in direct response to the political climate in which we were coming out of the pandemic, coming out of, most of the pandemic, but like, you know what I mean? Like I don't feel like that's a coincidence. So I do think that, and again, pop punk music and punk music will always be inherently political. It has always been. It was built out of a political movement. Like, I get that. Making it digestible for the mainstream again requires public and rampant outrage.
Yes.
Which is now we have that. So it makes it more digestible for the mainstream, and I don't think we're in the same place that we were post 9/11 with like the music that's coming out. Like, I don't think alt is like totally alt music and pop punk and whatever the fuck you want to call it is totally in the mainstream again. But I think it obviously had a massive resurgence. And like I said, I don't think that that's
a coincidence. No.
And so like art, whether art is dictated by the culture or the culture is dictated by the art being made, I don't know. It's like chicken or the egg. But I do think it makes a huge difference. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
That was my tangent, my tirade on art being dictated by the culture.
This is so separate from what we've been talking about.
That's fine.
But I wanted to shift this conversation on a total non sequitur of the theater community experience. We have not recorded a podcast since Gavin Creel passed away.
Yeah.
And I can only speak to my own experience, but like, I think we're both pretty cynical about the theater, and have made our opinions about the theater pretty clear. But I don't know that there were many people in the theater community who made me feel a little less cynical as much as Gavin Creel did.
Yeah.
I just wanted to take a moment to like acknowledge and honor him and his contributions to like the theater world, his personal impact on my life. Totally. Because like as a kid was one of the reasons I wanted to do theater.
Yeah. I think that's
was like a huge reason I wanted to go to the University of Michigan, was a reason I started singing, like watching videos of him perform. And also was like, we have said our piece about theater education and how expensive it is and how fucked up it is, but was a real advocate for how theater education can change people's lives, for the importance of scholarship so people can have that opportunity and not have to pay exorbitant amount of money. Totally. I do not think I would have moved to New York or gone to Michigan in the first place if he didn't exist. And I also don't know if I would have stayed at Michigan while I was there if he wasn't there, or if he hadn't had an influence on our department. Like I for context, for people who wouldn't know, Gavin Creel was incredible Broadway performer, who had a 20 plus year career performing on stage, passed away about a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
Was a fast moving cancer that people did not know about. It was not made public.
To keep it private.
And it hit me really hard in a way that I wouldn't have necessarily expected, because Gavin was an alumni of the University of Michigan, which obviously where I went to school, but was also just kind of like a light in the theater community. Was like a really joyous, beautiful, like, talent aside, because one of the most talented people I've ever seen perform, incredible voice. Like, it feels weird to say that aside because it was incredible, like Tony Award winning, incredible performer, but just a really kind, beautiful person who lit up rooms, who made me, in the limited times I got to spend with him, feel really important and like what I was doing was important. And it's a really crazy thing how life can just, I don't know, like the knowing someone is so vibrant and full of life, to see that just disappear from the world feels like it deserves to be acknowledged, because I think what he brought to the theater community, and I can speak more to my own experience in a little bit, but I've just been rambling for like 3 minutes, so
I get it.
Like to give you the opportunity to speak. If you'd like.
I never met him, but I've been listening to his voice for my entire life, and I saw him in Hair when I lived here when I was like 12 or 13. And you know, James obviously went to Michigan as well, and it also hit him extremely hard, and you guys are not alone in that. And seeing the impact that this person had on so many people was shocking to me. I was like, how does a person have this much time in their lives to make so many people feel so important? And I think that was a gift that he had. It seems to me that it was like when you were speaking with him, you were the only person in the room, and he made you feel really fucking important. And to lose someone like that in this community is really, really devastating, and it does deserve a moment. It deserves all the moments. And you know what it else fucking deserves? To dim all the fucking lights on Broadway. The fact that is not happening already. I don't know if they've decided to do them all.
I don't know. There's been this conversation with Gavin and with Ken Page, who passed away, with a couple different Broadway like luminaries who passed away recently.
Yeah.
That reeks to me of just like administrative incompetence, where it's like, I don't know how you can do that. For context, some theaters are maybe dimming the lights for these different Broadway legends who passed. It's bullshit. And should not be as complicated to figure out as it is.
It shouldn't.
But I just want to speak to, like, I was very lucky to have met Gavin at multiple different points in my life. The first time I met him, I was like 14. He was doing Book of Mormon on tour in San Francisco, and I was in a coffee shop with another friend. I was doing theater. We were doing a show in downtown San Francisco, and he was in the coffee shop, and my friend was like, holy fuck, that's Gavin Creel. And I had seen him like 2 days before in Book of Mormon, and we just like very nervously went up and said hello. And he was really, really nice. We told him we did theater, and he was just really encouraging. Like, it was a short conversation. We didn't want to disturb him, but as a 15-year-old, like,
made a huge difference.
Was just incredibly kind and nice. That was my first experience. And then he made it his goal. Like, he is someone I believe that really believed in giving back to the next generation of theater goers. Like I said, he was like a very big advocate for how theater education changed his life and how it could change other people's lives. And he was very present at the University of Michigan. Like, I didn't have the relationship with him that some of my classmates did, and some people at school where like it was a true mentor mentee. I don't want to claim that because it wasn't my relationship with him, but he would come in, like we would do labs with different performers. One of my first memories of the next time I got to interact with him, because through high school, like I held on to that experience for a long time of having met him, because I would see him perform. I had just seen him do what at the time I really wanted to do, but there were videos online, his voice in these recordings, like it was just one of those things, like a real model to aspire to. And my first interaction with him was so kind. But then I remember I think it was my sophomore year of college, we had a lab with a Michigan alumni who she had just had a leading role on Broadway. And we caught her, I think, on a tough week. It was like a Monday. She came in and did a lab. And we were all kind of shook because we're all trying to be on Broadway. And she just was coming off of being like a...
Later.
What? Yeah.
I'm going to make you tell me what it is later.
But she was coming off like a leading role in a show. And she had had a really bad time because she had just not been treated well, I think, by the director, by a couple. She had like a bad experience on Broadway and didn't know if she wanted to keep performing. And we, all these kids, 19, were like, oh my God, this happens in the theater. This is what we're aspiring towards. The next day, we had a lab with Gavin Creel. And Gavin, it felt like breathed life back into our whole department the next day, where he talked about how difficult it can be to be a performer and how much you have to take life. And like, I remember the way he talked about it was, he said, you have to stop thinking of your career and your life as a ladder that you're always climbing. Like he said, we were like frogs in a lily pond, and you're just kind of like hopping from like lily pad to lily pad, doing your best to like not fall in the water, just keep it up. Like, he just had a really beautiful perspective on life and a really big belief in like the beauty of theater and that it mattered. And every interaction I had with him was like that, where it didn't matter where I was in life. It didn't matter what I was trying to do. It was encouraging. It was a belief that you could do this. And I think he just was like in a world where a lot of people who become famous or successful are just assholes, he was really, really kind and encouraging to anyone who came after him, and was like a model for people. Like, I wanted to be him or like him for
think that's
so
true
long.
for so many people.
And I think it made me a better person.
Yeah.
And so it's tough to just see someone go who, like, that was like, I had a peripheral attachment to him, and it meant so much to me that he would still take that time. And I think of like how many people he had that impact on, whether they met him or not. Or I have so many friends with stories about like him taking the time to make sure that they were good, or like spending 30 minutes with them to get their voice right, or to get their confidence right, or to talk them up and make them believe that they weren't making a mistake pursuing the arts.
It's so important.
Yeah.
It cannot be understated how important those kinds of people are.
And I think more people should aspire to be like him. I think he's a model to aspire to. And so I thought it was important that we talked about it.
I think it's super important. I think there are things in the world that happen that just make time feel like it stops moving for a minute, and I haven't experienced that a lot in my life, but that definitely felt like one of them. And yeah, I think it's really important to talk about, and I think it's really important to like honor what he did for even me. Like I just like, it's just a voice that I grew up listening to my whole life and always knew who he was, and always knew, and just a person that you just never heard a bad story about, a person who was just always advocating and always giving back. And when he won his Tony, like the speech that he gave, and he was like, I am dedicating my Tony to the department, the musical theater department at the University of Michigan, because it made me the person that I am. And I think you and I are both testament to the fact that, like, yeah, we have criticisms and critiques and whatever, and we're always going to do that because it's just kind of the people that we are.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that. But my arts education absolutely made me the person that I am today. And I am so grateful that there are people that are willing and continue to give back to the younger generation of artists. And I only hope that I can be one of those people.
It also just, I cannot overstate how toxic the theater world can be. Everyone is pitted against each other because we will hammer it forever. There are so few jobs and everyone is competing.
Yep.
And having people who genuinely, whether they know you or not, are supporting you and saying like, no, there is beauty in this art form. We don't have to deal with this in the most toxic way possible. You can like aspire to the beauty of this thing and the support of other people. Is just so uncommon. And I think that's why it's hit me so hard. I also like, I don't know, it's been a weird couple months. I dealt with another loss in my life of someone who, like Gavin, was a really joyful person. And it was like a very surprising, out of nowhere death. And I think it just reminds me how much you have to really lead with joy in your life to go after the things that you want and say that you want them and go after them. Tell the people you love that you love them. And not take anything for granted, because like he was an immortal person to me.
Yeah.
Like an actual immortal person. The way his like life force shined. There's no better way to say, like, he felt like a giant amongst normal people to me. And like there was this Ben Pasek posted his last text message from him about like, you just have to live like while you have your life.
Life is for the living, baby.
And what I will say to Gavin's credit, in the time that he lived really beautifully. And I think it is a huge loss that he's gone.
I completely agree. I think it will forever be a huge loss. And I think dealing with death and grief, especially from young people, you kind of always have this weird feeling after you lose someone like that, where it's like you may have understated their impact on you. And maybe it's just us, and maybe that's just how, you know, human people deal with death. But I also think when a young person passes like that, like when Max died, like it always sort of feels like this thing, like, not this person.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder if those people are like a little closer to the source in some way, because it always ends up feeling like just this like massive thing. And like I said, like those moments when the world just feels like it stops turning.
I think we can take for granted too how, like, I took for granted how important Gavin Creel was to my life and development until he was gone. Yeah. And that's a really difficult thing. Because, and it is the same with, I just want to give like honor to my friend Lulu, who passed away recently, who was very like loving and kind person, who you take for granted how much that joy means to your own life until they're gone. And that, like, the world is really harsh and unfair, and life is so fragile. And we who are still here have to try our best to live with that type of vitality, both in their honor and because like they can't anymore. So I mean, this has been like the hardest left turn any of our podcasts have taken in terms of our first act and second act subject. But I
don't necessarily think it's so unrelated, because I said this earlier when we were having our political conversation about empathy and compassion and collectivism. And I do think that a lot of these things, like I said, like you said, this world can be so fucking harsh and so horrific. And there are always things that we can be doing better or more intensely or with more whatever. But really, at the end of the day, I think what is so important to hammer home is just to live your life while you can, and to tell the people around you that you love them, and to just be a force for good as much as humanly possible. And that's not to like get down on yourself when you're not doing everything you can, but just in every moment of your life, just be present and be with the people that you love. And it's so hard because it can just be so fucking dark.
Yeah.
You know, it really can. And to remember those of us, or those people who are not able to be those people for us anymore because they didn't have that opportunity or whatever, you know?
Yeah. But those losses, I do think, like, at least for me, make me reevaluate, like, where is my cynicism right now? And like, how much of that is serving my life? Because
yeah, I'm with
there is so much in life that is beautiful and worth protecting and worth fighting for,
yeah,
and worth honoring. Like, those people might be gone, but they live on in us, and that joy, if we can keep it moving forward, like if you don't get overtaken by the cynicism of the thing, by the just like depth of despair that life can bring. And I do think like the best way you can honor those people is to not let it overtake you. Because
and it can be so hard. And that's not to minimize how hard it can be, but it is possible.
With that, I feel like that's glass slipping for the day. We had a third act planned, but I don't think we should do that now.
Let's get it.
This has been glass slipping. Thank you so much. We're gonna have a little funny outro that we filmed last week that feels inappropriate now. But like and subscribe on all platforms. You'll find us anywhere you get podcasts. We have new episodes every Friday. Thank you. Goodbye.